end of December 2023, we had 22,411 open source developers contributing to crypto. And that's down 24% year over year if we were to compare that with December of 2022. This one is really fascinating. This is probably one of my favorite charts, which is if you actually break down the number of monthly active developers by how long they've been contributing in crypto, it shows a very interesting and nuanced picture, which is that developers who have been working in crypto for over a year is actually growing steadily. This is while developers overall have declined. And the experienced devs, so the devs who have been here for over a year, grew by actually 16% over the course of 2023, although developers overall fell by 24%. So why do we care about how long these developers have been working in crypto? Well, it's because experienced developers push more code. So 75% of code is actually created by developers who have been in crypto for over a year. And this is another way of looking at it. This is basically breaking down the number of average monthly commits by how long developers have been in the space. We broke it down into 3 different buckets. Developers who have been around for less than a year are newcomers. Developers who have been around 1 to 2 years, or developers who have been around for 2+ years. And very clearly over time and very consistently, developers who have been around, the longer developers have been around, the more commits they're pushing on a monthly basis. And then this is also, I think especially just coming out of what was a pretty brutal 2023, but still feeling like despite prices plummeting, there was so much innovation and so much being built in the space. I think this chart really highlights what was going on there, which is that established developers, so again, developers who have been in the space for over 2 years, actually have grown at a rate of 52% per year for the past 5 years, and in fact are at all-time highs. And so the other notable thing here is, of course, who are the developers who left then? You know, when we lost 24% developers year over year, where do the losses come from? Well, they come from the newcomers. They come from the developers who have been in crypto for less than a year. They poked their heads in, and then they went right back out, at least over 2023. But again, you know, you can see emerging stayed relatively flat year over year, and then established actually grew 33%. All right, so why do these newcomer developers rise and fall? Why do new developers, why is there so much variability for new developers who are coming into the space? Well, newcomers tend to follow crypto asset price appreciation, and I think maybe that's not a shocker to everyone here. But you can kind of see pretty clearly that during these peak years, right, so 2021, maybe I'll use this pointer. You know, during 2018, you had this peak of new developers coming in. During 2022, 2021, you have, 2022 especially, you had over 90,000 new developers contribute to crypto. And this is especially remarkable when we go back and remember that this is just open source developers. Again, not many developers are developing, not everyone is developing open source. And so it's really remarkable that you saw over 90,000 developers do something in crypto for the first time in 2022. But even though the number of new developers fell pretty significantly if you compare 2022 with 2023, it's still actually much higher than the 2018 peak. And so what that says to me is that although the number of new developers fell, crypto is fundamentally now so much bigger that even during a bear market, we're having more new devs poke their heads in and do something new and contributing to open source than at the peak of the previous cycle. So to break that down a little bit more clearly, we can look at newcomers by month. So the newcomer number we've been looking at broken down on a monthly basis, overlaid with the dark green line, which is network value. And over here, I think you can pretty clearly see that as network value rises, the number of new developers rise. Again, not shocking, but I think what's really awesome and encouraging for me to see is that even though you do have these price falling off cliff situations, which I think we all experienced in 2023, It's not that new developers don't come. New developers don't go to zero. You still have so many new developers coming in and trying things out. And this is what I was talking about before, which is that 1.95x, so almost 2x more monthly new developers joined in this bear market versus the last bear market. So again, crypto as an industry has just expanded so much, and there's so much more developer attention now. So 2023, again, was a year that a lot of newcomers tried out crypto despite it being a bear market. So what really drew these newcomers into crypto? We broke down which ecosystems these newcomers contributed code to. And the first thing that really is crystal clear, I think, is that Ethereum takes the lead here. 16.7 thousand new developers wrote code in Ethereum, which is almost 3x more than the next largest ecosystem, which is Polygon. And then you can see some other ecosystems here like Solana, BNB, Cosmos, Arbitrum, Polkadot, Near, Avalanche, and the list goes on. And there's actually quite a large torso of popular ecosystems. 17 ecosystems had more than 1,000 new developers contribute open source code last year. And what's really fascinating is that if you just try to add up all of these numbers, you'll find that it's actually higher than the total number of newcomers that came into space. So why is that? How did that happen? Well, it's because these newcomers aren't just supporting one chain, they're actually developing code on multiple chains. And so I think, again, this data reaffirms something that maybe many of us have thought for a long time, which is that developers are now contributing to multiple chains across crypto simultaneously. So we dug into that part of it. So really quickly, what is a multi-chain developer? So a multi-chain developer is a developer who, for example, maybe works on Go Ethereum. This developer would count as an Ethereum developer. Or maybe they work on Matic Network Bohr, in which case they would count as a Polygon developer. So when we break down individual ecosystem developers, Polygon would get one developer in this case, Ethereum would get one developer in this case. But when we aggregate these numbers, of course, we dedupe, so we're not double counting. A multi-chain developer can also be someone who, for example, works on this smart order router repo on Uniswap. And because Uniswap supports so many chains, Ethereum, Polygon, Optimism, et cetera, they would count as developer on each of these chains as well. So let's focus in specifically onto the multi-chain developers. 34% of all developers in 2023 actually built for multiple chains, and 8.2% supported 5 or more chains, which is pretty remarkably high number. I was a little surprised by this. And multi-chain developers have 10x'd since 2015. Specifically, most of the growth in multi-chain developers happened after 2018. Between January 2018 and January 2021, the percentage of multi-chain developers grew by 125%. This is also very fascinating, which is that over the last 3 years, it's been a very stable 30% of developers who have been working on 2 or more chains. And so this means that across both a bull and bear market cycle, we've seen a pretty stable, share of developers being multi-chain. And so to me, this seems to indicate that multi-chain is here to stay. It's not a narrative. It's not, just a new trend. It's something that that developers are really supporting for the long term. And again, I think here you can see that the darker the orange becomes, the more chains, the more monthly active developers are supporting higher numbers of chains. And so even though 30% supported multi-chain, multiple chains, this growth of the dark red spot over here means that developers are increasingly supporting more and more and more chains. So the share of developers supporting 5+ chains actually have been growing very steadily, and the share of developers supporting 3+ chains reached an all-time high in July of 2023. So now that we understand that a lot of developers are working on multiple chains, which chains do they actually have in common? So that's another fascinating thing we can look at. And in order to look at that, we can use these nodes and edges to represent ecosystems and developers. So a node would be an ecosystem. If two nodes share full-time developers, then they would be connected by an edge. And the heavier that edge, the more developers they share. So keeping that in mind, in 2018, this is what the picture looked like. Probably not too surprising. There's kind of this Bitcoin ecosystem where there's shared developers across Bitcoin. There's this, Ethereum, Polkadot, Cosmos. So there's some shared developers here with the strongest, number of overlap in developers between Ethereum and Polkadot, which is also not surprising. And then there are a few things like islands, right, like Stellar, who didn't share significant number of developers with other ecosystems, or Monero. So this is 2018. And if you look at 2018 versus 2020 versus 2023, you see this progressively complicated picture emerging, which is another way to show us just how much multi-chain has really exploded and how complex this industry has become. So 2018, again, kind of Bitcoin, there's Ethereum, Polkadot, Cosmos. 2020, there's some complexity starting to emerge. 2023 is just a big cluster. So let's just take a closer look at 2023. This is the blown up version of ecosystems that share developers in 2023. And just to dive in and show a couple of interesting anecdotes here, Ethereum shares the most developers, shares developers with the most number of chains of any ecosystem in crypto. So they share developers with over 20 chains. And again, to remind everyone, the thickness of the lines indicate how overlapping these developers are. And so there's a great number of overlapping developers between Ethereum and Polygon, Ethereum and BNB, Ethereum Arbitrum, and with Optimism. And then EVM compatible chains also tend to share developers with other EVM compatible chains. This is probably also not super shocking, but it's really interesting to see how this EVM, what started really as a hypothesis that if you make things EVM compatible, that developers can easily move back and forth. We're really seeing that in action. We're really seeing that come to fruition in 2023, and just what kind of a network effect that really creates. And in fact, 87% of multi-chain developers work on at least one EVM chain. The yellow part is non-EVM. So this represents the share. So we're looking, a fairly small share of developers are working on multi-chain, are working on multiple chains, but are not EVM. So maybe this is a developer who works on Solana and Cosmos simultaneously, would fall in this yellow section. All right, so since 87% of multi-chain devs are in EVM ecosystems, we can also look on-chain to understand developer behaviors a little bit more deeply. And that's where crypto is really fascinating in that it lets us develop these on-chain insights. So let's look at contract deployers. Again, the big caveat here is contract deployers are not developers. You can have multiple developers using one deployer. You can have one developer using multiple deployers. So, I wouldn't think of this purely as developers, but it does again give us some insight into the trends that are emerging. So the way to read this graph, which could be a little bit complicated, but we'll walk through it, is we can start kind of horizontally, right? So this means that of all deployers that deploy to multiple chains from base, 15% also deployed to Optimism. 9% also deployed to Avalanche. 22% also deployed to Ethereum. So that's how to read this. And so, another example here would be of all the multi-chain deployers on Ethereum, 35% of them also deployed to Polygon. And you can also read it vertically, which this instantly shows you that multi-chain developers, at least across these EVM-compatible chains, very heavily also develop on Ethereum. So again, Ethereum is this really important central node in this multi-chain world that we're now in. But it's not just Ethereum, right? You also have Polygon and BNB actually sharing a lot of deployers with other chains as well. And then also BNB, Polygon, and Ethereum share a lot of deployers with each other. So this really reinforces what we saw in that Git commit data, right? If we looked at off-chain data, we can see that Polygon, BNB, and Ethereum share a lot of developers, and now when we look at shared deployers on-chain, it's really confirming that same story. Maybe even before I go, also all of these slides are on developerreport.com, so you can take a closer look there as well. But there's all sorts of really interesting nuggets here if you just like spend, I know it's a little bit confusing, but if you spend a little bit of time staring at this, there's some really fascinating insights. So for example, there's some incongruity that happens between ecosystems as well. So if you're an Optimism multi-chain developer, 30% of Optimism's multi-chain developers are also deploying to Arbitrum. But that's not actually the case in reverse, right? If you're an Arbitrum developer and you're a multi-chain deployer, only, let's see, where's Optimism? Oh yeah, only 13% are deploying to Optimism, meaning that if you're on Optimism, you're very likely to also deploy to Arbitrum. But if you're on Arbitrum, you're not as likely to deploy on Optimism. And so just really interesting little nuggets in here. All right, so the other thing we can look at is where is new code first deployed? And new code in this sense is a way of, for me, is a stand-in for innovation. So where's new logic first happening? The way to do that, so Ren created this, he's somewhere in the crowd, but Ren created this analysis for us at Electric. So we can identify logic blocks, and then we create a unique, we basically hash the logic block. So we fingerprint each new piece of logic, and now that we can uniquely identify each piece of logic, we can say, oh, well, this piece of logic appeared on Ethereum first, and then it appeared on Arbitrum, and then it appeared on BNB, et cetera. So we can actually track the migration of innovation as it filters across different chains. And 71% of contract code is initially deployed on Ethereum. And so Ethereum is really the largest, or like the origin of most innovation currently for EVM chains in crypto. And unlike other chains, Ethereum's code is mainly unique and homegrown. So this light yellow part is homegrown logic, right? Unique, appeared on me first. In every other case, most of the logic on chain is not homegrown. It's being imported from another place, except for Ethereum. And there's also some other really notable exceptions here, like BNB actually has quite a bit of original code, Polygon as well. And you can see the emergence of that on Arbitrum, on Base, and of course on some of the other chains as well. And now we can trace where they show up first and then where they end up. So again, Ethereum is really the largest exporter of, well, first, most of Ethereum's logic is only found on Ethereum. But Ethereum is the largest exporter of innovation for crypto today. I suspect that's not always going to be the case, but at least at this point in time, that is very true, which is most things start on Ethereum, and then they flow over to other ecosystems. But again, it's not the only place where innovation happens. There's also other chains that sometimes contribute logic back to Ethereum as well. And most contract logic and L2s also originate from Ethereum, which I think is not shocking today, but one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing is new logic that's going to be deployed on L2s first. And they may or may not ever make their way back to Ethereum. Okay, well, with the last few minutes, I think we spent a lot of time looking at developer numbers overall. We spent some time exploring multi-chain developers. It's also really important to put developers in context and understand geographically where a developer is located. In order to get this data, we looked at self-reported location data for 25,000, around 25,000 developers in open source. And there isn't a very clear concentration of developers in any one region of the world, meaning that developers are actually geographically very decentralized, which is super cool. So you see a lot of developers in North America, but then also in Europe and Central Asia, and around the world. And in fact, 72% of crypto developers live outside of North America specifically. And this is a map where you can kind of see the concentration of developers. Of course, a lot do live in the US, but you also have high concentrations in India, across Europe, in areas of South America as well. When we zoom in and look at the US specifically, we can see that while the developer ecosystem has actually, in terms of the number of developers, has actually 2x'd since 2018, the US lost 14% developer share. So in 2018, 40% of open source crypto developers were located in the US. And that has been in a steady decline until 2023. We saw about 26% share of developers in the US. And there's two causes. One is that more and more developers are coming online, and more of those developers are overseas. And the other thing is, just anecdotally talking to a lot of developers, I think there's nervousness, anxiety around US regulations, which is causing a lot of developers to go to other regions of the world as well. And you can see that the US is the one that experienced the most significant decrease in developer share since 2018, while India experienced the highest increase in developer share. But again, these green areas here indicate growth in developers. So South America, areas of Africa, areas of Europe experience growth as well. And so South Asia, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Western Africa, and Southern Europe collectively grew share by over 20% since 2018. And I'll end it there, but you can find all these slides. It's 180 slides, believe it or not, on developerreport.com. And then we'll also have more live information around developer numbers there. But thank you so much.